Hello everyone, welcome to the Ren'Py Workshop. It is our second workshop of this semester, so we're happy to have you guys here today. So just to get started, we're going to introduce what Ren'Py is. So if you aren't really familiar, Ren'Py is a visual novel game engine, and it has its own scripting language, which is based on Python. Python itself can also be used in Ren'Py. And then one of the most notable games that's made using Ren'Py is Doki Doki Literature Club, so a lot of you guys have probably heard of that one. And then in this workshop, what we're going to do is we're going to just go over a brief overview of things you need to know about Ren'Py, what's important that you'd have to know to make your game. Next, we'll go into some basic mechanics in order to actually make a visual novel or dating simulator. And then third, we're going to get hands-on and we're going to try to make a little scene together. So first, let's get started. So I assume you guys have downloaded Ren'Py previously before joining this workshop. Once you open Ren'Py, this is what the launcher will look like. And so over here is going to be where your game directory and asset directories are. I'll get more into what those are later, but basically these are your folders where all your game files and your assets will be stored. So you can access those directories by clicking on any of these here. You could obviously also go into your own file explorer and then open them yourself there. Over here is where you can open your project in your text editor or IDE. Over here are your individual files, so you'll have like script.rpy. But if you click open project, that will open up all of them, all your folders and all your files. But if you only need to open just one, you can just click right here. This is where you can play your game. You will edit your code in your text editor IDE, but then to actually run the game, have it open up as a visual novel, you'll have to click Launch Project here. And then Preferences, that's where you can change some settings. The most important ones you'll have to know are changing the project directory and maybe changing your text editor or IDE, but you usually don't have to. It's mostly the project directory that you'll have to know. Right. So once you click Preferences, this is what the window will look like. So you can see some options you can change. Right here is where you can change your project directory, your text editor, your language. So I installed Ren'Py about a year ago now, so I don't actually remember which step of the way that this window will show up. But if this is your first time using Ren'Py, at some point when you try to edit a file, it will ask you what text editor or IDE you want to use. And so they have some suggestions here. The first one is Visual Studio Code, which if you're a computer science major, you're probably already familiar with. A lot of people use it. So you can just go ahead and use that if you'd like. If you don't have that, or you're not a CS major, then you might want to use Atom. Either one will work. They're both completely fine. It's just that Atom is a lot more simplified, has less features than Visual Studio Code, which isn't a bad thing. You don't need a lot of features in order to work in Ren'Py. Atom will have everything that you need. So if you're, for example, not a programmer, not a CS major, so you don't really need all the features that VS Code has, all the extensions, then you can just use Atom. Atom is also what I'll be using during this workshop. So earlier I mentioned some of the directories you'll have to know. Sometimes they can get a little confusing, especially if some of these folders have the same name. So I thought I'd just break them down and explain to you how they work. So your big folder, the first one you'll have to know is the project directory. This is where you store all your Ren'Py projects. So whenever you create a new project in Ren'Py, those projects will be created in this project directory. You'll have to just create your own folder and then you'll be able to define it. So like I said before, in your preferences, you'll have to set your projects directory so that when you create new projects, they will be automatically created in there. In this example, they're just in GitHub. Next, inside your project directory will be your base directory. Like I said, when you create a new project, it will be created in the project directory. So what's created is that base directory. It is the folder where everything concerning your game will be stored. That folder, the base directory, won't be called that once it's created. It will be created with the name of your game. And then inside the base directory is the game directory. It is actually called game. That's the actual name of the folder. So it'll contain all the files that are used by the game, including your .rpy and .rpyc files. So your .rpy files are your actual code files, the ones that you edit. The .rpyc files, you can, for the most part, ignore them. They are your compiled files. Ren'Py will compile your code and execute those. So you shouldn't really touch them yourself unless you're deleting a .rpy file. Then you should also delete the compiled file, or else it'll still detect it. And if you give any paths in your code to a certain file, all those paths are loaded relative to the game directory. I can probably show examples of that later. And so inside your game directory, like I mentioned, will be all your files and assets. So your .rpy files, all of your code, your art, your music, etc. So let's get into some basic mechanics now. So some basics to know about working in Ren'Py. So Ren'Py programs can be broken into multiple files. So you can have one file, script.rpy, that's where you start. And then you can have another file called like intro.rpy, and they are seen as the same. They can be connected even though they're on different files. So you can transfer control to different files using jumps and labels, which I'll get into later as well. Ren'Py script is based on Python, and you can also use blocks of Python code in Ren'Py. So assets are generally stored in specific folders in the game directory. You don't really have to if you define the paths yourself, but generally it's just easier to. They also make some of those folders for you once you create your game. And then your program will begin running in script.rpy. That file is automatically generated for you, and there will be a label called start, and that's where your program will start running. So safe statements and characters, those are the two very basic things you'd have to know first. So narration and dialogue is added using safe statements, which have two forms. A string of dialogue. So a string, if you are not a programmer, that's just some phrases in between two double quotations, as shown in the example here. If you put in Ren'Py a single string of dialogue like this, that will show up as narration. It won't show any character's name. It will just show that dialogue. And then next will be two strings, one of a name and one of dialogue, like right here. The first string is Sylvie, separated by a space, with another string with her dialogue. When you put in code like that has two different strings, the first one will be used as a name and will be shown like in the little nameplate, and then the second part will be the dialogue. And so in this example, you see that you have to type the full character's name, but you can define characters in order to prevent having to repeatedly type a name out, especially if the character has a very long name. This is very convenient. And when you define a character, the color of the name can also be defined. So here, how you would format it is define S, for example. Typically in Ren'Py, you will define with just a single letter for their name. Doesn't have to be, but that's the easiest way to do it. It simplifies things a lot when you're putting in a lot of dialogue. And then, so that's going to be your variable name, and equals character with a capital C. And then in the parentheses, you're going to put the name of the character, so Sylvie, for example. You don't have to put this part. You can just leave it here without that comma. And that's all you need to define a character. But if you'd like, you can put color equals and then put a hex code of the color you like. And then that will change the color that the name will show up as in Ren'Py. So if you want to associate different colors with different characters, that's how you do it. And then here, start is where the program starts. And so once you've defined a character like this above the start label, you can just put S and then Sylvie's dialogue instead of having to repeatedly type Sylvie every time you want her to say something. So next are images and backgrounds. So images are stored in the images directory, and they also follow a certain naming convention. The images directory should be inside the game directory, I believe, or the base directory. It'll just be called images. And then you just put all your image files, your .png, your .jpegs, your web files inside that folder. And so the name of your file should have a tag and an attribute. So what those are is, you see this image here, Eileen Happy. So the tag in this case is Eileen. That's like the name of the character. The attribute is happy. So you can have like Eileen Happy, Eileen Mad, Eileen Neutral. Eileen would be the tag for all of those, and then anything afterwards are the attributes. You can also have multiple attributes. So you could say like Eileen Happy Night, and then that will be a different image. So if an image with the same tag is showing on the screen, it will be replaced with the new one with the same tag. So for example, say I was showing Eileen happy on the screen, and then I want to show Eileen mad. That would replace Eileen happy. So then it will only show Eileen once. But if I had Eileen happy on or Eileen mad on the screen, and then I put Mary happy to show, both of them would be showing at the same time. So the show statement is what you would use to show a sprite on top of a background. And as I mentioned, if a sprite has the same tag, then they will be swapped out for each other. So that's also how you would do it. If you want to show a background, you would use the scene statement. So a scene statement would clear all the images, all the sprites showing on the screen, as well as the previous background, and would show the new background. And when you have images in your folder to use as a background, the tag should be BG. So in this case, the tag is BG, and then the attribute is meadow. And then hide is used to just hide a given image. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So these are some examples: show Susan happy. And then here they want to have Sylvie leave the scene, label leaving. And so they just hide her image, and then she'll just go away. So transitions and positions. Transitions to images are added using with, followed by the transition, and then positions are specified using at. So here we have the scene of a meadow, and then they added transition with fade. You can also add that on the same line. So when you do that, it will make the background show up with a fade transition. Ren'Py has a lot of transitions already in it, such as like dissolve, fade, other things. You should be able to find the full list of them in the documentation. Right here, show Sylvie green smile with dissolve. So that will show the sprite of Sylvie with a dissolve transition. And then positions. So sometimes you have multiple characters on the scene, and you don't want all of them to just be stacked on top of each other. If you've seen Doki Doki, sometimes they have like 3 girls on the screen at once. So you want to specify what position they show up in. So like I said, positions are specified using at. So in this case, it's show Sylvie green smile at right, and then she'll pop up on the right. Ren'Py also has a bunch of different positions already specified in Ren'Py, but you can get into some more specific code, I think, with the ATL, and also define your own positions if needed. Menus and jumps. So in a visual novel or a dating simulator, one of the big mechanics is having the player make some choices, and then those choices define, what happens in the game. And so how you do that is with a menu statement. So menus can also be given names, by the way, if you want to specify a name for a certain reason, but you don't have to give them one. And so here you have menu, and then after that, so because Ren'Py is based on Python, indentation is very important, by the way, if you're new to programming. So if you make a menu or a label or anything, you have to have this indentation. That's very important. And then once you make your menu, you can write in a string, so in a double quotation, what your options will say. So in this menu, the 2 options will say it's a video game, and the other one will say it's an interactive book, and those will be the buttons the player picks. And then inside these options, that's where you add what you want to happen when the player clicks that option. So in this case, if you click it's a video game, it will jump to the label game. So then the program will look for where the label game is, so it'll come right here. And then once you click that button, it'll run this line and then jump to Mary, which will run this line. And so, yeah, typically if you want to have branching options, you'll do jumps. You can also do things such as like change a flag or a variable using these options. Okay, so speaking of flags and variables, we'll get into how you do that. So the keyword default is used to initialize a variable, but you have to do it before the start label. You can't do it inside or else it won't work. So right here, default book equals false. That's just their flag defined before the start label. But you can also create flags and variables using Python instead of just using this default keyword. So if you want to use a single line of Python, you will start the line using the dollar symbol, and that will tell Ren'Py that that line right there is going to be actual Python. It won't be the Ren'Py script. If you want to do a block of Python, so it won't be just a singular line, you'll just start the block with Python and then the colon. And then conditions, you can check those flags and variables you created using an if statement. So right here is a line of Python where it's the variable flag equals true. This one is an example of an integer rather than a true false. So a line of Python where it declares romance points equals 0. And then if you want to increase romance points by 1, this is how you do it, romance points plus equals 1. And then this is an example of the Python block if you want to do more than a single line. Like I said, you just write Python and the colon, and then just write whatever code you want here. And then once you have these variables, obviously you want to do something with them, which is when you would use the if statement to check like if it's true or false or how many points the player has with a certain character. So you'd put if book. So this would check if book is true. And then if it is, it will run this line. Else, so if book is false, then it will run this line. If you want to check a numeric value rather than a true false, then you just write if book is greater than, the greater than symbol in the 3, and so on. And then to end the game, that's very simple. You just put return, and then that will signal that that's the end of the game. But it's a very sudden ending, it'll just exit out of the game. So usually you want to say something that will signify that that is the end of the game, like some sort of background image, or just say it's the good ending or bad ending, etc. The return statement is already in the script.rpy file by default, but if you create other files or just other labels, things like that, you'd have to add it in yourself to make sure the game actually ends there. If you don't have it, the game will actually still end by itself, but it's better to say it outright that that's where you want the game to end. All right, so I went over all the basic mechanics and things to know, so now I can go ahead and get started with working in Ren'Py ourselves. All right. So if everyone has Ren'Py installed already, and then you also, I sent a .zip file in announcements as well for some art we can use. So if you guys don't already have that downloaded, please do. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to create a short little scene or story. So me and Enzo create this little outline of what we want to do during this workshop. So we have a few scenes. The first scene is going to be the introduction to the setting, the background for the main character, background for the love interest. And then here we're going to have some menu choices so that you can see how those will work. And then these will be the possible endings. So first of all, in that folder I created for you guys, the only background I have is Genshin Impact. So if anyone has any other suggestions for what you think we should make our game in, you can go ahead and suggest them. Any ideas? Okay, if you guys don't have ideas, we're just making our game in Genshin, okay? Um, okay, so when you open the Ren'Py launcher, the horror, well, that's what you guys get for not suggesting anything. Now you have to have your game in Genshin. Okay, so at CPP, the CLA, actually, can I find that? Oops. Okay. In Japan, Guilty Gear. Let's see. Let me see the CLA first. Okay, these images don't look like the right size, but I could still try them and see how they stretch if you guys want. Okay. Oh, this is a GIF? Oh my gosh. Okay. So I'll just save that into that folder. Okay, so now we can get started. So, like I mentioned, this is what the Ren'Py launcher will look like. This is a test project I made last night, so you guys won't see this one, but you should see tutorial and the question. So once you guys have the Ren'Py launcher open, you can just hit create new project. If I'm going too fast for anyone, you can just say so, and I'll slow down. So then it'll say I'm creating an English language project because my launcher is set to English. That's fine. You don't have to worry about that unless you want to change it. Then enter the name of the project. Um, let's call it workshop. Okay, so here it will ask for what resolution the project should be. By default, it will be 1920 by 1080. So I'll just click that. But if you want to change it, you could of course choose any of these. And then it'll ask for the accent and background colors. These will be the default colors of the game or like the main menu screen. It doesn't really matter because you could change these and usually you'd customize it anyways. I like this one though, so I'm just going to choose this one. You can choose whichever ones you want. And now we'll be creating the new project. All right. So now this project shows up right here. And as you can see, you can open files here. Okay, yeah. Okay, you can open your files right here, your project, your directories. I think around here, when you open your project, this is where it'll ask for your text editor if you guys haven't set it already. Like I said, Atom is just fine. That's what mine is set to. So I'll click Open Project. Okay. All right. So right here, Workshop is the base directory of this project. And then right here is the game directory. Like I said, it's literally just called game. And that's where everything is. That's where all my code is. And that's where my assets will be, the audio, the images, things like that. So let me just go through what some of these files are. So GUI.rpy, that is where you can customize some GUI elements, the interface elements of your game. You don't really have to touch these if you don't want to, but right here, you can like change the accent color, you can change some other colors, things like that. You can look through it yourself. They have a lot of comments here, so it's pretty easy to figure out. Options.rpy. Um, these, I think a lot of these are more for builds of your game when you're actually building it. Like this is the name of the config, this is the name of the version. So if you're releasing multiple versions, you'd change this. Generally, you won't really touch these much. I think this file is also where if you want to play some music in the main menu, it should be somewhere in this file. Yeah, there's like some music ones around here. Yeah, this is right here. If you were to delete this, so it's actually code, this would play music in the main menu. But I won't mess with that right now. Screens.rpy is for pretty self-explanatory, just different like screens, other GUI elements. I generally don't really touch these either, but if you want to get like really into customizing the GUI of your game, you'd probably go into this file as well. And then script.rpy is going to be the file that you want to look at the most. It is where you'd write code. It's where you'd start off. You can make your own files as well. Right here is the start label. So this is where your game will start. This is where you define variables and characters. And here's some simple example code. show background, show Eileen happy, some dialogue. And right here, this is the end of the game. And right here, these folders will be where you store your assets. So all your images, like I said, they should have a certain naming convention. All these right here. I've already set them by that convention. They have the tag and the attribute. So I'm just going to copy and paste them into the images folder of this game project. So let's see. Desktop, Ren'Py projects, and then this is my game. Go into the game folder, go into images, and I can just put all those assets in there. And then that's basically all you need to do to be able to add these assets into the game. If you want to put in music, the audio folder is where you'd put them. And then the GUI folder is where, by default, the GUI elements will be. So if I were to launch this game right now, it just looks like this. And so you can see in this folder, some of those elements are there. You know, the background, the little window icon in the corner. If you ever want to customize these, all you have to do is add the image you need for it, rename it to the name of these elements, and then get rid of this original one. So I could put my own window icon, rename it to window_icon, and then get rid of this one, and then it will automatically change that. All right. So first off, we're going to introduce the setting, which is, as we decided, the CLA. So scene background CLA. I'm just going to change it to that, so that's how it'll start off. I'll hit Control S to save that. And then gonna start. Oh my gosh, it doesn't fit. Well, anyways, that's how you would show the image if it normally fits. I can just show the Genshin one as an example. There we go. So that's how it'll normally look like. It's pretty simple. Just put scene and then the name of your background image. So our first lines of dialogue that we want is to introduce the setting. So this will be where the narrator or protagonist would kind of like think to themselves or just like narrate. So in this case, you wouldn't really use this format of dialogue where you have a character or a name. You just have the single string right there. So I want you guys to help me because I'm not a writer. What would you write for this background? How would you describe that? I want this workshop to be interactive, so you guys are going to be my writers. Fish? I mean, I could. I have no clue what happens in Genshin. Genshin. You don't have to know what happens in Genshin. Just describe this background. Describe the scene for me. We have to set the scene for our dating sim. Oh no, I'm in Genshin Impact? Okay, that works. Okay. Anyone else has any contributions to this? You guys are also free to unmute if you want. I'm not strict about that or anything. This is where they send all the insane mental asylum patients. Okay. Alright. So I'll hit save on that. And then here we go. So as you can see, if you don't put the, oh my gosh. Okay, if you don't put the name of the character or a defined character in front of the dialogue, it will just um, this dialogue will just show up by itself about a name right here, which will kind of indicate to the player that it is some sort of narrator or just the player themselves. Hit enter, and then that's our dialogue. And that's as far as we have in our code right now. So when I hit enter again, it'll just exit the game right there. So then next up, we have background for the protagonist slash narrator. So what kind of protagonist do you guys want in this game? It's time to spend my entire life fishing. Okay, I'll add that too. Amogus. You want the main character to be Amogus? Blender Cube? Amogus? Do you get the background? Okay, so I have that folder that I sent you guys that called Workshop that already has the images, right? Did you take these images and then like place them into the images folder right here? So let me, okay. So this is like my workshop folder, and then I'm going to have my game folder right here. And in game, there's a folder called images, and then I'll paste all of them in here so that the game has these images. Have you done that part yet? Okay, yeah. That's how the game will detect them. They'll have to be in that folder. Amogus Sweep. So does everyone want Among Us? Okay, I guess that's our protagonist. So we want to add some lines of dialogue for our protagonist, I guess. Just as like, we can describe our protagonist or what their thoughts are aside from the setting. Does anyone have any suggestions for what our Among Us will be saying? I'm a 6'9" red Amogus. Aesthetically pleasing. Sus. Okay, I'll put all of those. Oops. Okay, I forgot. Does that. What else? Real spec. Oh my gosh. You know what? Okay, I'll save that. Let's see. That saves properly. Okay. Oh. Okay, that's all we have right now. Okay, I think that's enough for describing our protagonist. Alright, so we decided our protagonist is Among Us. Now we have our love interest. So, out of these options, it's not refreshed. Um, oops. Okay, so out of the options that we have for our workshop, who do you guys want to be the love interest to the Among Us? Sonic, Minecraft Steve, Sonic, Steve, Steve, Blender Cube, Steve, Buff Among Us has two hands. I think Steve wins. Okay. Well, if you guys want, you could write it yourself where Buff Among Us can date Steve and Sonic at the same time. But I'm just gonna write Steve because Steve won. Okay, so what dialogue should we have for Steve? Or like, what thoughts would Among Us have about Steve? Either one. He's so blocky. Okay. Oops. Okay. His eyes are so rectangular. I'm just gonna copy paste them at this point. Okay, well, now that we've described Steve in our game, we should probably have Steve show up right here. So we want to do show Steve. The only one I have of him is the walking one, so it'll just be that. And then, so what dialogue should we have Steve say now? Because we can't just have Among Us like monologuing at him, you know? We need some dialogue from Steve too. All right. So, of course, to make things easier for us, we don't want to have to keep typing Steve every time we want to say something, so we will define a character. So, right here, we can just change this line instead of writing our own. Define S equals character, and then change the name to Steve. And I think it's more interesting if we give him a certain color. So, let's give him a color. So, like I said, all you need is a hex code for a color. So, I'll just search blue hex code. Um, and then you can choose any one you want. I like the bright blue, so I'm just going to choose that one. I think you need. And then just paste that color in there, and then his name should show up as blue. So now, when we want to add Steve's dialogue, oopsie, okay. Just, you just put S for Steve, and then you can type his dialogue in. And then that will just automatically show up as Steve inside the um okay. Yeah, so that'll just automatically show up as Steve. And then you can paste that. Okay. Okay, that's all we have for Steve right now. So let's hit Control S to save that right now. And then hopefully that looks okay. So I'm just gonna reload this and start. Why does that show Eileen? Oh, I forgot to get rid of that line, I think. There we go. Very cool, guys. All right, so that's what we have so far. I should probably get rid of this line so Eileen does not show up anymore. All right, yes, this is going great. So next we have the branching. So in signing incident, they ask you if you would like to hang out. So we already have Steve asking to guess his favorite block, and then if you do, you can go on a date with him. So here the player should be able to make a choice. I'll just give two options to make it simple. So to give the player a choice, as I mentioned earlier, you want to make a menu. So we'll put menu here. And then, so what choices do you guys think we should have? What are the two choices for blocks? Diorite and diamonds. Okay. Poisonous potato. That is not a block. Okay. Diorite. And then put some colon there to show that that's a choice. And then diamonds. Okay. And then, so in a menu block, you can also, so this dialog will show up before this menu pops up. If you want, you could also add something here like, oh, what should I pick? And this dialog will show up at the same time as this menu. You can put it as dialog from Steve if you want. I'll just do it as dialog from our protagonist. And then, so these are our two options right now. So which one do you guys think should be the correct option? Do you guys vote diamonds or do you want diorite? Diorite? Oh, it's tied right now. Diamond. Uh, okay. Maybe I can't count, but I think diorite is winning. Okay, and then so diorite. So we want Steve to say something that choosing diorite was correct. So if the player chooses diorite, what should Steve say in response? Okay, this one's kind of funny. Oh, okay, I like that one. I'm good with that one. Okay. And then, so if the player chooses diamonds, which is not correct, what do you guys want Steve to say if you choose the wrong option? Crushes your blocks. Yeah, I like the block crushing. I'm gonna do that one. Okay, so I'll save that. So, is anyone lost so far on what we've done? We've basically just added the images to the images folder, and then we've changed script.rpy to have some narration to show the background, show Steve, add some dialogue for Steve. We declared a character, and now we're creating a menu. Does anyone have any questions? So if you want a new scene, does that go in the same script? Technically, you could. You can write your entire game in the script.rpy file if you'd like. But obviously, if your game gets long or you have like different days on your game, just like distinct divisions like that, you usually don't want to put them all in the same file. So you can just create a new file. Let's see. Yeah, just you can create a new file and you can call it like, why can I not name this one? Okay, well, you should be able to name it intro or just whatever you want to name it, .rpy, and then you can just jump to that new file using a label, and that should work too. So you don't have to do everything in script.rpy. You can change things in different files how you want. Can I see how you set the variable for the character again? Yeah, okay, so to set a character, you just do define, and then the letter you want to go with their name. It doesn't have to be a single letter. It could be like something else, but then like that kind of defeats the purpose of defining the character if you make it long. So typically you just do one letter, and then you put equals character with a capital C, and then inside here you'll put the name of the character in double quotations, and then that's all you technically need. You don't need this part. This is all you need. But if you want to change the color of his name, you'll do color equals, and then you can just put whichever hex code you want here. It can be literally anything. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. I think we are all good. I'm gonna close this one. All right. So since we're going to have some multiple options, so right here, you answer correctly, and then you need one more answer till the date is accepted. So I think for the sake of it, we should create some sort of variable. I think those are pretty important in visual novels and dating simulators. Usually people want to create some sort of variables or flags rather than just have a very like simple game. So I think it'd be good to show you guys how you would do that. So right here, we can either use a line of Python or the default keyword. So I'll just use default. And you have to define it above the start label or else it won't work. So default, and then I'll just call it points. So the points you have with Steve, and I'll set that to 0. So then now, once we have that, we can go back to our menu. And if we chose the right answer, we want to give the player a point with Steve. So we can do that with a line of Python. If you guys remember to do a single line of Python, all you have to do is put the $sign, and that will tell Ren'Py that this is Python. And then I can put points, and then plus equals 1. If you are not a programmer, this is an increment operator. It will like add 1 to the current value of points, and then save points as that value. And then we don't have to do anything here because we don't have any points to deduct. So then I'll just save that. Any questions so far? Yeah, it's basically like if you points equals points plus 1, that's the same thing as that little assignment operator. Okay, so if there's no other questions, so now we have it branching. So since we're branching, I think it's better to do some labels and some jumping. So over here, let's see, we can have label, I'll just say correct. So that is if you choose the correct answer, and then label incorrect. You can name these labels whatever you want. This is just what I'm doing to keep it simple. So the labels themselves don't really do anything necessarily. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's just a label. It's like the name of like this part of the code. So these labels won't stop like at that label. So if I have code incorrect, like right here, and then I don't put return, then the code from correct will continue running into incorrect. So you have to be careful with that. If you want it to stop here, you need to put return or have some sort of jump so that if you choose diorite, it won't run both of these. Alright, so you choose the correct answer, and then Steve builds a heart with you, you get a point with him, and then from there, then you'd want to jump to correct. So what that will do is that it will find the label correct, and then the control of the code will just jump over here. So then it'll skip whatever happens below this little block. And then here, you would jump to incorrect. And then that will skip over this section, and then start right here. All right, see ya, Sam. Okay, so now for correct, you answer close to correctly. One more answer until date is accepted. So what kind of question should we have Steve ask as a follow-up after asking the favorite block question? What do you guys think? What's my favorite tool? All right, if that's the only one, then we can ask that. So then Steve asks, what's my favorite tool? And then, so of course we'll have another menu right here. So what options do you guys want for this menu? For what tools you can answer with? Hoe, netherite hoe. Only one of those. All you guys are saying hoes, and then you guys aren't saying anything that's actually a tool. Man. Okay, you know what? We'll just go with that. So, netherite hoe is the first option. Second option, keeper. Oh man. Alright. So which one do you guys want to be the correct answer? Hello, welcome to whoever just joined. The hoe is the correct answer? Okay. Alright, so this is the correct answer. Then since this is correct, we will give the player another point with Steve. And then this one, they don't get any points. So what should we have Steve say now that the player has won their heart? Gives you creative mode, you're my hoe now. Hmm. Okay. You guys react to which one you like more. I like both of them. Oh. Alright. Alright. So what do we say if the player doesn't riz them up successfully? Hello, welcome. You ain't nothing but a creeper, man. Oh, that is so good. Alright. So we have the player picks his favorite block, and then what Steve says after that. What do we want to do if the player picks the wrong option initially, and then they still need to get asked something? Because if they get another question wrong, then they'll get rejected. So what should the player be asked now? Do you guys want to do the same question, or do you want to do a different one? I'm fine with either way. Different? All right, that's a good one. All right, so now to save themselves from getting rejected, player has to answer. So once again, what should our options be now? Sheep, dollar, pig, sheep. Okay, sheep is one of them then. Oh, I love the frog. Okay, so right now, sheep and frog are winning. Okay, let's go sheep and frog. So, sheep and then frog are our two options. All right, which one's the correct one? Sheep. Sheep is the correct one. Okay. Oh my gosh. All right, so sheep wins by a large majority. So we can give the player point for that. So at this point, this is where the player picked a wrong option, so they didn't get any points. This would be the first point the player gets in this branch. And then, so what should the players, or what should Steve say in response to choosing your favorite mob? This is where the player saves himself from getting rejected, but they still don't get to go on a date. So true. All right, we can go with that. And then if they chose the wrong option again and then they get like very badly rejected, what should Steve say? Bans you? Okay. All right. So now we have these menus here. At this point, we just created these two branches, and now we have our endings. So let's create a label for an ending, label ending. So I want to make use of these points since we created them, which is why I'm doing it like this instead of just jumping directly to different endings. So can say here you would jump to ending. Like I said, you don't have to do it like this. You could just jump directly to like your different types of endings, but I want to show how you'd use the points, so I'm just doing it like this. And then now you can do if statements to check what you should, how many points you have. So if points is equal to 0, if you are new to programming, by the way, you have to put two equal signs here if you're checking like a conditional like this. If you do a single equal sign, that will assign a value, like how points is equal to 0 here. So if you want to check it, you have to put both. So don't forget to do that. So if points is equal to 0, that means the player gets rejected very badly. They had no riz. So what should we have in this ending? Should we have Among Us like narrating to themselves how they're like heartbroken, or should we have Steve like going off on them? Just add some dialogue, whatever you guys want. This is how I got ejected. All right, yeah, if you're using VS Code, you can try out that plugin because, like we mentioned earlier, Python and Ren'Py are very sensitive to indentation. They don't have like curly braces and stuff to show your blocks, so you need to have indentation, right? So that plugin could help. And we can add this. Oops, okay. So for this character in Among Us, we actually did not define a character for them. So far, I've just been having them as a narrator. If you guys like to, you could create a character for the Among Us as well. It's up to you. And then you. So this is the bad ending. And then we can have if points is equal to 1. So the player did not get to date Steve, but they did not get badly rejected at least. What should we have here for this ending? Any suggestions? You're now my pet. Okay. And now, if the player has 2 points, then that means that they get to go on a date and they had some very good riz. So, how should we describe the good ending? I don't think you can add emojis in there, but I'll add the rest of that. Okay. All right. So this is our good ending, apparently. So I'll hit save on that. Okay. So now we pretty much have the outline of our game. If you guys remember earlier though, the picture, we just had a picture of Steve show up. So if you want, we can add the Among Us. I don't know if that buff Among Us is gonna work. I don't know if, oh yeah, that is not a PNG. Um, Let me see if I can go back for that. Okay, here we go. That should be. Oh, that's the wrong folder. No, no. Ren'Py accepts the web files, so this is fine. It's just the other one. I don't know what the other one was. Okay, so that should work. So scene, BG Genshin. Oh no, I'm weird. So we can just show the player right there. I think that's a good spot. And then, so right here, if I just have it like this, the Among Us and Steve are going to show up on top of each other in the middle. So maybe right here I will just hide the player temporarily. And then, so maybe for part of our game we want to have both of them on screen so we can see them like talking to each other. So let's try to show both of them. Let's see. Maybe right here. So we can say show Among Us buff. And if you guys remember from before, to specify position, you just write at. So let's say at left. And then I can say show Steve at right. So I'll just save that, and then let's see how it looks so far. So it's gonna reload real quick. All right, let's see how the game looks. Oh, that didn't work. Why not? Mm. Okay, let me see. Because one of these over here is already a web file. Okay, this is so sad. For now, I'll just put the regular Among Us. I'm sorry for the disappointment, guys. Not really sure why that one's not working, because Ren'Py does accept the web file. Yeah, some of these here. I mean, Steve works, and that's also a web file. Okay, well, anyways, let me reload. Okay, there we go. If you're in the Ren'Py game like this and you want to reload so you don't have to keep closing and opening your game, just hit Shift R and that will do a reload. There we go. Alright, so now we hid the Among Us and showed Steve. Alright, so now they're on the left and the right. And we click diorite. Steve builds a heart. What's his favorite tool? Netherite hoe. Alright, so that was our good ending, and then the game ends there. And then if you want to see what it's like to pick the other endings, so pick the wrong one, last chance, we'll do frog. Alright, so then that's our bad ending. Okay. He's so small. I don't know why that one's not working. It should be the right file type. Well, I'm sorry about that. I wanted him in the game too. But we have to make do with the regular Among Us. Alright. And then just for the sake of it, we can also just check out what it's like to get the more neutral ending. So click the wrong one, click the right one here. Okay, and then alternatively, you can click skip if you want, by the way, but I'm just clicking through. Click the right one, click the wrong one. There you go, that's also the apparently neutral ending. So all of our endings seem to work. Does anyone have anything else to add? Any questions? We've successfully built a game with 3 different endings, some branching, different options, a point system. So does anyone have any questions or anything else to say? Yeah, you joined at the end, Larry. You missed all the Steve and Among Us romance. Everyone say L to Larry. Okay, if we have multiple files to separate days or scenes, how do we transition to those other scenes? Okay, so let me create a new file. So let's say in this one, I have a label here, and then this is label day 1, and then I'll say like, this is, oops, okay. So this isn't showing up with the right colors because it's not saved as an RPY file yet. So you just save that, and then make sure it's in the right spot. It has to be in this game, the game folder with all the other code. So this would be day1.rpy, for example, and then save that. So then you have this new file, and then can say like, so even though it's a new file, it can still detect all the things that you defined here in script.rpy. So you can just say Steve, and then I should be able to still detect that. And then I'll hit save. And then, okay, I'll just do it right at the beginning so it's easier. So if you want to move from script.rpy to this new file, all you have to do is do a jump to the label over there. So jump to day 1. So now, right after this line, it should jump to our second file. So if you want to see that, I can just like run that for you. Hit Shift R to do quick reload, and then start. There we go. So see here, it just jumped over to the next file. And that's all you need to do. You just need to add labels and then some jumps, and you should be good. Anyone else have any questions? After this workshop ends, I will send out a link to the Ren'Py documentation, which will have a lot more detailed information than what I went over in this workshop, because this workshop was introductory. So if you guys ever want to get into more like complicated things, you can just go look at the documentation. My workshop only went over the quick start for the most part, but there's a whole lot more you can do for customization. Did Doki Doki Literature Club just use this? They did actually. So someone actually decompiled the code for Doki Doki, and you can see here, game. This is all the code of Doki Doki. The entire script, they have multiple files. So if you actually want to see what writing a huge game like this would look like in Ren'Py, you can search up for this repo by Second Thunder, and then you can just take a look if you want. Don't steal their code, obviously, but just for like educational purposes, if you want to see what something like that would look like. You can add music to your game. I didn't go over that in this workshop, but it's very simple. Just play the music and, show Sayori, all the other things. So if you're interested in that, you can go look that up. Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions or comments? Okay, so if there's nothing else, then we can end this workshop here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I tried to make it interactive. If anyone would like to see the code that we created today, I can try to get that posted up somewhere too and send out that link as well with the documentation. I will also post the slides as well if you guys ever want to refer back to those. And then a recording of this video should come out soon too. All right. So if anyone has any questions, you can stay after and ask still. Other than that, feel free to leave if you like.
Can you redo the entire workshop?
No.